right, so Arrowhead Guys, we're here with the venerable Seth Keysor of the Athletic.
I like it. I,
Yeah,
I think every time you should use a better adjective to describe me. Eventually, we'll get to like weird ones like bodacious or something.
don't dare me. So the topic of today is Tyreek Hill. Obviously, I saw you on Twitter last night. You were kind of wading through the crowd trying to figure things out.
Yes.
Just want to give us a quick assessment of what you do or don't know.
Well, I don't know anything. And I think that's the first place that people need to start. We don't know anything. I obviously, for people that don't know my background, I currently my primary practice in law is child protection. I've also done criminal prosecution and criminal defense, meaning I've seen about 20 gazillion of those reports. And sometimes they end up with criminal charges, sometimes they don't. Often they don't. What I do know is reading those reports is that there's two separate reports that were made. One about an incident that may have occurred back in February, and calling it even an incident is tough. One about a report was made about something that allegedly happened back then. That's the one that alleges child abuse / neglect. Here's the interesting thing. That's the one that Hill and his fiance are named, not as suspects and not as reporters. And that's that's a term of art. The reporter is a person who calls it in, the reporter. The fact that it's not her and it's not him would seem to be indicative that someone else called it in. Usually that's because a third party outside the home, especially in situations of child abuse and neglect, that is someone saw something that they found concerning and then made a call. Sometimes, usually, but not always. And I'm not saying that's what's going on, but that's what it looks like. And then you've got a second report, this one again, where Tyreek Hill isn't mentioned. And these are publicly available by now. If you look at my Twitter feed, finally a news organization, rather than just talking about him, released him. And I appreciated that because we could look at it for ourselves. The second report was an allegation of battery, and all it just had next to the criminal complaint, not complaint, that's a term of art. Basically just says battery underneath where the reason for the call is. And it lists his fiance as the other involved person, because they have codes, right? Like each person that they list, they label them as like R for reporter, other involved is OI, that kind of thing. She's listed in that one and Hill is not. And then I believe, if I'm recalling correctly, I don't have them in front of me, I believe looking at the reports, the juvenile, as to be expected, is not named. So you can infer things from that, but there's really no facts there to go off of. Here's what I know in my experience. What got reported is that there was some kind of incident that the way the Star made it sound, and I have nothing but respect for my colleagues at the Star. I'm sure they wouldn't report something without getting good information. And so I just want to clear the air there, because I had a lot of people thinking that I had a problem with some of the people at the Star. I do not. I trust them. I know them a little bit personally. They're good people and they're good reporters. So that's not what this is. I'm saying what my opinion is. The way things were phrased is that Hill is under investigation for battery, and that could well be what's going on. Based on those two reports, though, it seems weird to me, because generally speaking, because it talked about his son's arm being broken, if the police were called to a residence for a domestic and they came there and a kid's arm was busted and wife, fiance, girlfriend says he assaulted him and broke his arm, this wouldn't be it comes out a month later thing. This would be he would get arrested that night. And that's the rule in every state right now. It used to be that most states have rules to where if there's an allegation of domestic, it's an automatic arrest. Most police departments have that. The one possibility that I'm thinking here is kiddo got his arm broken somehow, and maybe they said one thing at the time, and then a month later, someone said something else. That could well be what's going on. That's why it would have been reported in mid-March as opposed to back in February. So there's a lot of things going on there, or there's a possibility that someone else was watching their kid or someone else's kid and they reported it. There's a lot going on here. I would think if that last part were the case, we would have heard something from Tyreek Hill by now. Like if this was like, whoa, hey, I reported something, That would be like you get that out there immediately. The fact that he hasn't made a statement tells me that there could be some problems.
Conversely, I almost wonder, the first police report was dated. Were both police reports done in March, or was
Both were
one?
done in both reports were made in March. One in both roughly mid-March. But one of them actually states a couple of other dates in there, and
Yeah.
the way that it's stated, and I actually had a law enforcement member mention this in my feed, it made it sound like they're referencing a prior incident.
Okay. Well, I think, really, aside from a lot of chatter, it's one of those things we're just going to have to wish for the best.
Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you, my oldest son, he has a birthmark on the side of his eye. It's purple, uh, about the size of a quarter.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't tell you how many times that somebody just looks at it and just gives you that look like you smacked him.
Yep.
The worst is when it's the same person like 5 different times. What happened to your eye?
It's like,
You just have
dude,
to-
I've explained this. Right. And for what it's worth, I mean, and again, I I don't know what happened. And it's so dangerous in these situations if you say the wrong thing to have people say that you're trying to make excuses or something like that. I'm not saying this as a Chiefs fan. I'm saying this as an attorney and as a dad. Sometimes kids get hurt. And in today's society, that's a terrifying thing for a dad.
Oh yeah.
My son years ago rolled his ankle pretty bad, and he kind of hurt his leg, and he was gimping around. And on our way to the hospital, this was before I was a lawyer, I was pretty nervous. A couple times when my kids have gotten bumps, bruised, when I go to the hospital, because I know from my experience, all it takes is one social worker at the hospital deciding that they think it's suspicious, and I have a child protection case against me. There aren't a lot of checks and balances to that part of it.
Yeah, that's honestly, I'm glad I'm not a lawyer, because that's something that's never crossed my mind. But now it probably will. Thanks, Seth.
Now you can be terrified every time you go to the hospital. And to be clear, most hospitals do a good job gauging things because there's red flags you can look for. But the fact also, Brooke later on tweeted out, Brooke Pryor with the Kansas City Star, she tweeted out that I don't remember what the exact name of the agency is, but it sounds like a social services agency is looking into it. That makes me wonder if this all isn't something more resembling a child protection case than a domestic assault case. Also not a good look for Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
To be clear.
And terrible timing, with the contract that they're working on. So
yeah.
I'm sure the Chiefs are not excited to be doing PR spin work on this and investigation right in the middle of free agency when they have other stuff to worry about.
Right. And then the whole thing, the fact that there's a kid involved, if there's not been any reports that I've seen that that his son's been pulled from the home, that's something that would be really hard to keep quiet.
Yeah. I think we've all seen the pictures that have been sent out from a day or two ago with his boy dancing, and the cast is off. So
yeah, and whether those were from yesterday or the day before or a week or two ago, I mean, the reports were made earlier this week and last week. And so, but I mean, you think you would hear something. Now, I know they've been pretty careful about their privacy. I know his fiance, who I try to make a habit of never saying her name because she clearly doesn't want that stuff.
Yeah.
And that's fine. They seem to try to protect their privacy for the most part, but you would think it would get out somehow. And again, I could be way off. Maybe the child will be pulled from the home. But if there was an immediate concern of domestic abuse, you'd think you would hear something, anything. And I'm not willing to go sleuthing through someone's Facebook and Instagram. I'm just not willing to do it.
Yeah. I think for all parties involved, we all just need to sit tight, hope for the best, and let the Chiefs be the ones that have to worry about planning for the worst, because there's nothing we can do.
Right. And then people will say, well, you're worried about the football side of it. Well, sure, we'll worry about the football side of it. And Kansas Social Services will worry about the kid, and the family will worry about the kiddo. I'm sure there are people that will make decisions to make sure that he's safe, which is good. But again, there's nothing that I've seen that says it's his son. And here, I have had people, and I do want to address something. There were Twitter rumors before all this broke out. And that makes you think, oh, well, maybe there's people who know a little bit more. I would just recommend people one thing. I have done hundreds of child protection cases, hundreds of family law cases, hundreds of criminal cases. In my experience, family members of the people involved in a court case and friends of people involved in a court case, and often even the people involved in the court case, often have absolutely no idea what's going on and give crappy information. And so if someone who is related to Hill or someone who is related to his fiance starts spouting off on Twitter, that does not mean it's true. I just finished a trial where throughout the pendency of the trial, the opposing party, she was constantly posting things on Facebook, painting out my client. I know I'm the lawyer, so it sounds like I'm just saying, but constantly painting him out to just be the devil, just the worst guy. In the meantime, social services had taken the child and placed them with my client because he wasn't testing positive for methamphetamine and she was. She never wrote about that on Facebook, though, interestingly enough. And that's just the tip of the iceberg for that sort of thing. And so it's important to keep in mind, just because someone knows Hill and his fiance doesn't mean they have good information. All they know is what they're being told. And unfortunately, in these cases, the truth is often the first thing that flies out the door. And be clear, I'm saying that about both sides here. Just because someone says, oh, I know Tyreek and he didn't do anything. Well, that's exactly what someone who did something would say.
Right.
Or on the other side, the same applies to her. So like you said, I think sitting back and just taking a breath and seeing how it goes, and maybe thinking, the Chiefs may need to address wide receiver. Maybe they should have traded for Beckham. I mean, it wasn't that steep a price.
AB would have been pretty cheap, actually.
Yeah, AB would have been pretty cheap. I mean, you have the big contract, but they were planning on spending a contract on someone anyway.
You got plenty of money.
Yeah.